Welcome to Programming Rainbow. In this video, we will continue on the series of the Beginner's Guide to SDL2 in the Odin Language. So this is video number 5. If you're just starting out with this video, you'll want to go to github.com, Programming Rainbow, Beginner's Guide to SDL2 in Odin. You want to git clone that repository, move inside of it with whatever editor you have, and the code that you'll find in the very top level is actually code from video 8. So you'll want to, since this is video number 5, you'll want to go to the video 4 folder, copy that to the top level directory so you could be right where we're starting off with in this video in the beginning. So here's the code from video number 4, the last video. Let's just see where we left off. Okay, so we have a screen and it's got a black render. It's got this background Odin. It has a title up here, it says 04 changing colors and icon. If we press the space bar, we can set a random color to the render, which changes the background. And there is an image loaded as an icon. I showed it in the last video. I'm not going to do it right now, but there is an image loaded as the icon, and we can close it. So in this video, we're going to be loading true type font. So we're going to have another module, an SDL2 TTF module. We're going to be loading a true type font from a font file that is over here. We'll use Free Sans Bold, but you could change this out for whatever font you would like to use. And we are going to create a surface with this text and the font, and then convert that to a texture and display it on the screen. We're also going to be talking about surfaces in this video and rectangles, SDL Rex, okay? So before I forget, let's change this up here to 05. And we'll call this creating text. Okay, so again, we are going to be working with a new module. This is the TTF. So this is how you initialize it. It's going to be TTF init, and it is going to return 0 on success or -1 on error. And there is nothing passed into this. Okay, so this is going to be the same thing. It's going to be, we're going to bring this in as TTF smaller, so it'll be TTF.init. So just like these up here, SDL and image, we're going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to add one. I'm going to call it TTF. Vendor, SDL2, and this will be TTF. So that'll give us access to that. And I'm going to go down to initialize, and I'm going to put it right down here. So we're initializing SDL, we're initializing the image module. Now we're going to initialize the TTF. And I'm going to just wrap this in an if. This is very simple. I'm going to do it just like this one up here, actually. I'm going to yank that, put it here. And this one is going to be TTF init. And there's no flags being passed in. But we still want to know if 0 is the answer. 0 is the good. Anything other than 0 is bad. And our error message is going to be error initializing SDL2 TTF is the actual. This is how it's actually written in the C SDL thing. So there's SDL2, there's SDL2 image, and SDL2 TTF. Okay, so that should get us the TTF module up and running. So let's go back here. And the first thing we need to do is load a font. So it's actually TTF open font. Creates a font from a file using a specific point size. Okay, I believe we're using 80 as the point size here. It's point size, not pixel size. And this is going to be a pointer to a TTF font, is what the type of this is. And since I'm going to be using this just for temporary, I am not going to put this into the game struct. I'm going to use a local variable instead, the way I did with the surface in the last video. So we need the string that is going to be the path to the actual true type font that we need to load. And then we also need a number that is going to be the point size. So I'm going to use 80. I'm going to set that in a and a constant, and then use the constant here. So let's set this up. So I am going to make a constant up here. I'm going to put these in their own section. This is going to be for true type font. So this will be font size, and I'm going to say it's 80. This is going to be in load media, where we're going to create this font, because basically the end result is I'm going to have a text that is a texture. So I'm going to have a hardware accelerated texture that is going to say Odin on it. So we're going to open a font. We're going to create a surface from some text in the font, and then we're going to convert that surface to a texture, and that's going to be the end result. So for this step, we're just opening a font. So I'm going to call this font. So font, and it's going to be ttf.open font. And we need the string to the font. So this font is over here in fonts, and it's called free-sans-bold.ttf. So fonts, free-sans-bold.ttf. Hopefully I spelled that right. And now we want the size, which I put that as font size above. So this is going to give us what we want. Now we need to check if this is nil or not. If this fails, this returns a nil or a null. The pointer will still be nil if this fails at all. So font, if font is nil, something went wrong, and we will say error loading font. Opening font. How about that? Now the error message I'm going to put as TTF get error here. But again, under the hood, this is all pointing to SDL get error. As far as I know, there's no special thing going on here. So even though I am using the correct TTF get error instead of SDL get error, I believe under the hood it is just exactly pointing at SDL get error. Okay, so this gives us our font, and we've checked it to make sure. Now we want to make a surface. We can't go directly to a texture. We do have to use our font and some text and a color to make a surface that has something written on it. So we are going to need a color as well. But let's look at this here. We're going to use TTF render text blend. This is going to render us something onto a surface. So it's going to take a pointer to a font that we just created. It's going to take the text that we want to, whatever we want to say, hello world or something like that. For this, we're going to use Odin. And then it wants an SDL color. And all an SDL color is a struct of 4 uint8s. Just like what we did in the last video where we were randomly changing the colors. This one will just be a struct of the 4 colors. So let's create this font first, or sorry, the color first. And it's going to be of type SDL color. I'm going to put that up here. I'm going to put it as font color. And this is going to be SDL color. And then I just want white, so it's all going to be 255. But you can change this to whatever color you would like it to be. Just understand it's RGB, and then the last one is alpha. So if I were to put this as halfway, you would halfway see through the text and the surface to what's underneath it. And that gets more complicated to what the surface is. And when you switch the surface over to the texture, if you retained that blend, I'm not going to worry about any of that. It's just going to be solid for me. So this is white, but you could change this R, G, and B's to be whatever color combination you want. So we wanted to say Odin. So I'm not actually putting it in the code. I'm just putting it up here. I'm just making a constant. There we go. So we have all these. So we want to use this function that is the TTF render text blended. The blended is like a nicer version, so you get smooth, rounded edges and everything. You don't have the kind of the stepping effects with the pixels. So this is the fancier version. There is a solid version as well. There might be reference down here. TTF render solid here, and another one. I don't know. I'm using blended. So we are returning a pointer to a surface, and we are taking in a font, we're taking in text, and we're taking in a color. So I'm just going to copy this here. And we'll be checking this pointer for nil to know if it succeeded or not. So this is going to be in the load media. And this is going to be TTF dot. And it's telling us the different things that we need. So the first thing we need is the font, which is just called font. And the next thing we need is the text, which we have is font. We created above font text. And the last thing we need is the color that we also created above is font color. Okay. And this is returning a surface. So I'm going to call this text surface. Text surf, something like that. So we have this font surface, and we're going to check it the same way we did here. If this is nil, something went wrong, and this is still part of TTF, the error. So we will say creating text surface. I do want to think about getting rid of or closing this font. So this is the sequence of events. So if I'm opening a font, so I have this font open, I'm checking to make sure it really is open. So if it didn't open, I'm bailing out, and I don't need to free it because it never opened. So if this goes past, it is open. The font does exist now. And when I come into here, I'm using the font. If this fails, this bails out, and I've never freed the font. So before I check to see if font surface is made, I'm going to free that font first, because I've already used the font. If this font surface was not created correctly, it's going to bail out. So before it even checks to see, and if it wants to bail out, I'm going to free the font first. So if we look at this, to free a font, we go to its close font. So TTF close font, and we know that this is already a valid pointer. This font is a valid pointer because we've already checked it above. We've already checked it right here, so we know it is valid. So I'm just going to free it right here. So it's close font. I'm just going to put the font in. So I don't care what happens. I want it closed no matter what. This is as long as I need the font to be open. I've used it here. If this fails, this is going to clean up anyway, but this is going to already be cleaned. The font's already going to be cleaned. So I've opened my font. I've used the font. Now that's gone before I even check to see if this surface is good. So I have this font surface now, and let's look a little bit about surfaces, because we do want to get some attributes from the surface, because in the first video, when we are drawing the, let me show you. When we draw this, the background, we're using nil and nil for the source and the destination rectangles. Well, we are going to use nil for the source rectangle again on this texture that we're creating for this font. So we get the whole thing, but the destination actually needs to be the size of the text that we want it to be on the screen. So we need this populated, and this is a rectangle. So let's look at that. I'm going to skip over surface for a second. This is a rectangle. This is very simple. This is just a struct that has an X, Y, width, and a height. That's all it is. So that's very simple. It's just 4 ints, int 32s, and that's everything we need to know about that. we need to populate the width and the height of this rect. We need to get that width and the height somewhere. And there's several ways we can do it, but the easiest way is if we already have a surface is to just query the surface. The surface has a member called width and a member called height that is already an int 32. So why not just use that? So I'm going to create a rect that we're going to use, and we're going to grab the width and height for this rect out of the surface. So right here we have this font surface. We're going to convert this font surface to a texture, but it's going to be the same size. But while it's in this surface mode, why not just get the width and the height out of it and populate our rect? So up here in game, I'm going to create a text rect. And this is not going to be pointer. It's just a text rect. So it's just an SDL rect. That should be all we need for that. And we're going to use this for drawing the texture. When we draw it, we're going to use this rect to draw it correctly on the screen, and we can use the X and the Y to move it around. But so it's just drawn at the correct width and the height that it needs to be. This rect also has the width and the height built into it. So right now, it's just going to be all zeros. But if we go down here where we have our surface, we can populate. So the g.text rect, and it's a member, and we'll call it width. Well, we're not calling it. There's already a member here. So let me just save it. Maybe the LSP is not understanding what's going on. Text rect. And it's the icon surf. Okay, there we go. I was a bit concerned that it wasn't telling me. Hold on. Dot. I don't know why this is not telling me what's involved here. It's like it doesn't see it. I was expecting the LSP to like autocomplete. So that should populate our width and our height from the surface right here that we're using. And now we need to convert this surface to a texture so we can actually use it. I'm going to move these. I feel like I've pushed these down. They should be up where... Oh, I see what I'm doing. I'm putting this in the wrong spot. That's what I'm doing. This should be in the load media. Right here. Okay, there we go. Okay, it's font surf, not icon surf. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I was sorry, I confused myself. Okay, so that's getting the width and height. Now we want to look at this create texture from surface. So this takes a surface and turns it into a texture. Pretty straightforward. This is just part of the SDL, and it's going to take a pointer to a render and a pointer to the surface. I'm just going to grab this name right here, which is going to be the same in Odin. And it's going to be small SDL. So we need the render. That's going to be G render. And then we need the pointer to the surface, which is going to be font surf. Okay, and this is going to return a texture, pointer to a texture. So we need to go up here and we need to create that. So I'll just call that text image. And this is going to be a pointer to SDL.Texture. So here we can go G, text image equals, just like that. Now, just like we did up here where we closed this font before we even checked, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Right now I have this surface, and I want to free this surface before I even check to see if this texture was created correctly, because I want it gone. Because if I put it afterwards and this fails, it will never free the surface. So I'm going to free the surface first. So it's going to be SDL free surface. We've already seen this before. And the surface that I'm freeing is the font surf. And we know that it's a valid pointer because we've already checked it right here to see that it is valid. So before we even check to see if this is valid, we don't know if this is failed or not, but before that even happens, I'm going to free this surface, and then afterwards I'm going to check. I'm going to check this text image to make sure it is valid. And if this is going to be creating texture from surface. Texture. Okay, and this error is going to be a SDL error. This is an SDL function up here. Okay, so I know this is a lot of stuff going on here. Initially, we are just initializing the TTF. And then we are opening a font, saving it as a font. And then we are creating a surface from that font with a color and text in the font, and closing that font right away before we even check the font surface is good. Then we check that. If the font surface is good, we are populating our width and height for our rect from the surface width and height. And then we are creating a texture from that surface. But before we even check to see if that texture is valid, we are freeing the surface right away. And now we are checking that texture to know if that was actually done right. Okay, so the last thing that we need to do on this whole chain of events is all of these were temporary except the very last one, the text image. This is being held in the game struct, so we need to make sure that we clean this, and this happens where we clean up our game. So up here, it's going to look just like this one right here. Okay, and this one is text image. Okay, so we're checking to see, and then we're freeing it, just like we did with the background. And it's on top because it's last in, first out. The very last thing we loaded is the first thing we're going to unload. Okay, so we've done all of this. We have this image loading. I'm just going to run it just to make sure I have no errors, but we're not going to see anything yet. Okay, it looks good. Okay, so the last thing that we need to do is actually display this. So we go down into here, and we're going to display it exactly the way that we did with the background, except we're going to use our rectangle right here that we have. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm putting it below it because it draws back to front. So the back is the background, and this text is going to be drawn on top of it. So I'm putting it below it. Everything happens from top to bottom. So if the background's first, it's drawn, and then what's drawn on top of that is the next thing, and on top of that, it keeps going down. So we do want to use the image, the text image, and this is source rectangle and destination rectangle. So our source rectangle, we want to use the entire texture that we just created. So this is still going to be nil. Our destination rectangle, we want to actually use the width and the height and the X and the Y, which are going to be 0 right now, of our text rect. Okay? But we can't just use it the way, like, we can't just do this. Text rect. We can't do it this way. We need to actually send in a pointer. if I save it, it'll probably complain about this. Hold on. Okay, so it's looking for, if we look at the signature of this, it's looking for a pointer to a rect. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to send in the address of this rect. Okay, so if we put nil here, well, I'll show that in a minute. If we put nil here, it'll stretch to the entire size of the screen, and it'll look all pixelated because it's taking a small image and it's stretching it bigger. We could make the text really big and it would look really nice, but when you stretch a small item to fill up the screen, it does look pixelated. So right now it's not being stretched. It'll be displayed correctly, and it should be in the top left-hand corner when we open the screen, because the X and the Y are both set to 0, and the top left-hand corner is the origin. Okay, there we go. We have Odin. And again, if I put the other one at nil, it's going to stretch this thing and it's going to look wonky. So let's see that nil. See, and it's very pixelated. This is not the fault of the TrueType font, because I could make Odin way bigger and it would look nice. It's the fact that we had a small image and that we're stretching it. So I'll switch that back and then I'll show you that we can make bigger. And the simplest way would just be to go up to the constant up here that is at 80. And we could put this at, say, 240. That seems like it would be a lot bigger. And do you see it's nice? It's not pixelated. So the pixelization comes from the fact that we stretched an image. All right, I'm just going to put that back to 80. And we do have creating text. It looks good. So let's just walk through what we have here. The very first thing that we did is an initialize. Under SDL initialize, under the image initialize as well, we just initialized the TTF module. It takes no parameters, so we don't need to set any flags or anything. And we're just making sure the output is 0. And then in loading images, we have this complicated string of events that we are opening a font. We are then creating a surface from a font, a text, and a color. And then we are populating our rect from width and the height from the surface's width and height. And then we convert that surface to a texture. This texture is a hardware accelerator. It allows it to be faster. It allows it to use the GPU. So that's what we actually want. There's no way to go directly from the TrueType font to a texture. So you do have to do this surface middle part. We have to come through the surface in the middle. And we are freeing up everything that we're not using as soon as we possibly can free it. So we're closing the font and we're freeing the surface. The texture itself is held in the game, so it gets freed when we shut the game down, which is in game cleanup. And that we're just destroying it the way that we did with the background. And when we display it, we are using the actual rectangle or the address to the rectangle that we use. So this is going to be X, Y, width, and height. So our width and height means that we are correctly displaying this. And the X and the Y are both set to 0. So 0, 0 is the origin, that's the top left. So, and the 0, 0 of the image is also the top left of the image. So it's basically saying the top left of Odin is going to be in the top left of the screen. And we can move that around, and we'll do it in the next video by manipulating the X and Y of text rect. I hope that was educational and entertaining, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day. Bye.